Ladies and gentlemen, the Toronto Maple Leafs would like to welcome all of you here at Air Canada Centre and those watching coast to coast on Hockey Night in Canada as we introduce the next three players who will be inducted into Legends Row. Located in Maple Leaf Square, Legends Row is a tribute to the great men that Leafs Nation was built on, a shrine dedicated to preserving their legacy. These three men will join an already impressive group of Maple Leaf legends with their own bronze statue. Our first legend was simply known by one name, and his infectious personality and championship pedigree helped make him one of the most celebrated goaltenders in Maple Leaf history.
Born in Brandon, Manitoba in 1914, Walter Turk Broda would join the Maple Leafs 22 years later. Unlike most pro hockey players, who earned their nicknames at some point during their careers, Walter was known as Turk since childhood, having been given the moniker because his freckled face resembled that of a turkey's egg. Originally property of the Red Wings, Turk was purchased from Detroit for the price of $7,500, considered to be a steep price during the Great Depression. The deal turned out to be an incredible bargain. Over his first 7 seasons, Broda would only miss 4 games. And in his career, he would play more games in goal than any other Maple Leaf, suiting up for the second most playoff games in club history along the way. In 1942, the Maple Leafs would drop the first 3 games of the Cup final to Detroit, but Turk was able to bounce back with a comeback for the ages. 4 straight wins, a feat that had never been accomplished in the final before, and has not been equaled by any other goaltender since. It was said that when the playoff bucks were on the line, the Turk could catch lint in a hurricane. Over his career, Broda would sport a playoffs goal against average under 2. Shortly after the 42 Cup win, Turk would take a leave from the Maple Leafs to serve in the Army during the Second World War. 2.5 years later, he returned to help lead the Maple Leafs to even more championship glory in 47 against Montreal, in 48 and 49 versus Detroit, and again in 51 against the Canadiens. No player in Leafs history won more Stanley Cups than Turk Broda. Beginning in the 30s and through to the 50s, there wasn't a bigger personality on the team than Turk, whether posing for iconic photographs, serving up memorable quotes for the media, being active in the community, or serving as a role model for his teammates. Like his fellow Hall of Famer Johnny Bower, he would finish his career as the oldest player in the NHL. Turk won more games and shut out more opponents than any other Toronto goalie, winning a pair of Vezina trophies along the way. Upon his retirement, he held the distinction of having become the winningest goalie since the foundation of the NHL. To celebrate Maple Leaf Gardens, the Toronto Star had high praise for the retiring netminder, citing that no other athlete of the present generation has managed to get quite the same grip on the affections of Canadian sports fans as the Turk. As for Broda, he would always describe himself as just a fellow who likes to play hockey. The Maple Leafs paid me for my work and practices. I threw in the games for free.
Please welcome, representing number 1 Walter Turk Broda, his daughter, Barb Tushingham. defenseman has played more games in the regular season and playoffs than him. His name is synonymous with grit and toughness.
Born in Cochrane, Ontario in 1930, Tim Horton would make his NHL debut during the 49-50 season, and by 1952, he had earned himself a permanent spot on the Leafs' blue line. Tim's reputation as a fine defenseman was equaled only by his physical strength. Despite his brawn, Tim would rarely drop the gloves. Instead, he would place his opponent in a bear hug and squeeze. Hall of Fame official Red Story would say of Tim, "He was the strongest man that ever played in the NHL, bar none. Thank God he was a nice guy." Tim's strength on the ice earned him the nickname Superman. While Tim's poor eyesight forced him to wear glasses away from the game, creating a Clark Kent persona off the ice, teammate Frank Mahovlich said of his teammate, "I never knew a player so steady. No flash, no polish, all hard work." On March 12, 1955, Tim endured a body check that resulted in a broken leg, dislocated shoulder, and a broken jaw. Dr. Hugh Smythe observed, "He must have been suffering terrible pain, but there wasn't a peep out of him." Tim wouldn't be down for long. He went on to set a club record for consecutive games played with 486, a mark that still stands today. In 1962, the Leafs defeated Chicago, and Tim would sip from the Stanley Cup for the first time. Tim would lead the Leafs in scoring that postseason, totaling 16 points in 12 games. If there had been a Conn Smythe Award at the time, it surely would have been Timmy's. Tim and the Leafs would win 3 more championships, in 1963 and 64 against Detroit, and in 1967 versus Montreal. Following his last cup, Tim said, "I think it was one of the happiest moments I can remember in hockey. I actually thought I was going to start crying. There were tears starting to go down my cheeks. It never happened that way before." Tim's strong work ethic extended beyond the rink. He spent his summers in Conn Smythe's gravel pit before branching out into the coffee and donut industry. The first Tim Hortons restaurant opened in 1964, and today there are almost 5,000 that bear his name worldwide. Tim was the first Leaf to reach 1,000 games, and in 1970 he played his final game with Toronto. He was 16 years older than the next oldest defenseman on the team. Tim played more seasons, more games, in both the regular and postseason than any other defenseman in Leafs history. And only 3 NHL players played more seasons than Horton. He was named an NHL first or second team All-Star on 6 occasions, a Leafs record, and in 1977, he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Tim's longtime defense partner, Alan Stanley, described him as the finest man I knew, on or off the ice. Playing with him was a wonderful experience. And his captain, George Armstrong, would say of Horton, "No finer person, teammate, or hockey player has ever lived."
Please welcome, representing number 7 Tim Horton, his daughter, Jerry Horton Joyce. Trophy. He began his Maple Leaf career by winning the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year, and he went on to win 4 Stanley Cups.
Born in Rouen, Noranda, Quebec in 1940, the son of a school teacher and a miner, Dave Keon had, by the age of 12, become the property of the Detroit Red Wings. But on October 6, 1960, he would make his NHL debut as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Dave Keon getting the rebound. And the little man from Noranda, number 14, made no mistake, and the Leafs lead 1-0.
In that season, he would win the Calder Trophy. Dave joined the Maple Leafs at just the right time. as the Leafs were about to embark upon a remarkable championship run. As it turned out, he was to be the final piece to the puzzle. Dave described the Leafs' approach in the 60s in the following way. Our goal was to win the Stanley Cup or die trying. And in 1962, he became a Stanley Cup champion in only his second season. In 1963, he led the Leafs in playoff scoring, sealing the championship with 2 shorthanded goals in the cup-clinching game against Detroit. Following the victory, Dave had already made his way to the dressing room when the Garden's crowd began chanting, "We want Keon." Dave wouldn't disappoint, returning to the ice in a thunderous ovation. After the celebrations, Coach Punch Imlach told reporters, "It may sound like a lot of big talk, but I wouldn't trade Dave Keon for Gordie Howe." In 1964, it was Keon's Game 7 hat-trick against the Canadiens that got them to their 3rd final in a row. Ever humble and always the team player, he would simply say of the accomplishment, "I'm happy I got 3. They came in handy." 2 weeks later, Dave Keon and the Leafs would win their 3rd cup in a row, defeating the Red Wings. In 1967, the Leafs would win their 4th cup in 6 years, defeating the Canadiens with Dave Keon being awarded the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoffs' most valuable player. Reflecting upon the victories, Dave showed the ultimate respect for Montreal by saying, "To me, when you win the Stanley Cup, you always look back. Who did you beat? Did you play the Canadiens? And did you beat them?" And yes, we did play them, and we beat them. Longtime Montreal Canadiens reporter Red Fisher would say of Dave Keon, he was the Canadiens killer. He would destroy them on some nights with the way he approached the game. 2 years following the '67 Cup, the future Hall of Famer was named captain of the Maple Leafs, a position he would hold for 6 years. In his career, he would be awarded the Lady Byng twice, and after 15 seasons with the Blue and White, Dave Keon had become the highest scorer in Toronto Maple Leafs history. Dave would retire at the age of 42, the last of the original 6 Maple Leafs. In his Leafs career, Dave averaged only 5 penalty minutes a season. But when asked to sum up Keon's style of play, Imlach would say, he played with bulldog tenacity. That's the only way he knew how to play the game. What more could you ask?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to Air Canada Centre, number 14, Dave Keon. Inductee class to Legends Row. Will you please join me in congratulating Turk Broda, Tim Horton, and Dave Keon. With Max Pacioretty, captain of the Montreal Canadiens, and Dion Phaneuf, captain of your Toronto Maple Leafs, please skate to center ice for tonight's ceremonial face-off.